Parasite Eve was released in 1998 and is based on the novel of the same name, as well as a movie adaptation of that novel and acts as a pseudo-sequel. This was Squaresoft's first M-rated game due to the gore within the game's FMVs. In the year 2000, it was ranked 16th in Famitsu magazine's top 100 PS1 games of all time, and in 2010, GamesRadar chose it as one of the top 7 90s games that need HD remakes. The game's success led to a two-part manga series titled Parasite Eve Diva. The game got a sequel in 1999 with an entirely reworked gameplay design, and then in 2011 there was a loosely connected third installment into the franchise. Finally, in 2011, Parasite Eve returned to the PlayStation Network. Parasite Eve has sold over 1.9 million copies as of February 2004. In Japan, it was the number 6 top-selling game of 1998 with 994,000 copies sold in 1 year. In North America, the game eventually sold enough copies to actually get a Greatest Hits Green Label reprint. So come with me back to New York, 1998, Christmas Eve, so I can tell you why I love this game. Parasite Eve is a beautiful blend of JRPG meets survival horror, which is one of the reasons why this game is so good. It brings me back to a time when developers actually took risks with their games, and pushed the lines between genres rather than reskinning the same game year after year while playing it safe and coloring in the lines. And more importantly, it brings me back to a time when creators actually cared about every minute detail of a game rather than just how far they could push monetization. Parasite Eve is the only game that comes to mind when thinking about video games based off books. In fact, the game is inspired by a movie that was inspired by a book, and then the game inspired 2 more books. This is one of the biggest surprises I've discovered since delving into the world of Parasite Eve. The game has a beautiful setting. New York City? Christmas? Snow? What's not to love? There is a raging lunatic that's been taken over by her own mitochondria. May have to unwrap your presents late, kids. The game also explores quite a few iconic locations, like Central Park, Carnegie Hall, the Museum of Natural History, even the friggin' Statue of Liberty. Parasite Eve follows the story of a rookie cop in Manhattan named Aya Brea. She reluctantly goes out on a date with a fellow officer to an opera at Carnegie Hall. The lead actress then somehow manages to set almost everyone inside the hall on fire, thousands of people. Aya somehow knew it was the actress that caused it, but she was unclear how. She pursues the woman backstage, and all the way to the sewers below as she runs into badly burned survivors as well as mutated rats and other small animals. The actress eventually escapes, and later on, Aya discovers that the actress is using the power of her mitochondria to not only harm innocent people, but to cause genetic mutations in these animals. This concept is actually based on somewhat real science regarding the mitochondria within the cells of all living beings. The mitochondria is the organelle that breaks down nutrients and converts it into molecules that our cells use for energy. Mitochondria also have their very own DNA separate from us and our cells. This has actually led to some real-life scientists theorizing that at one time mitochondria may have been some form of an energy-stealing parasite that found their way into our cells about 2 billion years ago. But I digress. The game features a different take on magic due to its somewhat realistic setting. Rather than casting spells, the protagonist has special abilities related to her own mitochondrial mutations. Aside from that, they work just like your traditional JRPG spells. The game also features a really interesting and well thought out method of modifying your weapons. You can boost each firearm's damage, range, as well as magazine capacity, but you can also add special modifications such as an auto potion type feature for your armor, or burst fire modes, or adding the chance to do a status effect when attacking. There's also multiple weapon types, such as handguns, assault rifles, shotguns, submachine guns, and grenade launchers. The game also has a traditional leveling system. However, leveling only gives the player BP as well as an increase to your health. BP must be spent to either increase your health, your speed, or your PE energy, which is used for using your quote-unquote magic. The player can also choose to apply their awarded BP to increase different stats of their weapons or their armor. Each time a player spends this BP to increase different stats, as soon as you exit the menu and get into your next encounter, you can actually tell a massive difference right then and there, which is always satisfying in a JRPG. The enemies within the game are everyday, typical New York wildlife. Giant rats, everyday birds, the mythical New York sewer system crocodiles that don't exist, your everyday insects, and even a few adorable canines. But they've undergone a sort of genetic mutation related to the mitochondria within their cells. The game has several repulsive and gory FMVs depicting what these transformations look like as they're happening. Rather than enemies being rendered on screen roaming dark corridors like you would come to expect from survival horror games at the time, these enemies are random encounters and load in once you've taken enough steps in the environment to trigger a battle, much like your everyday JRPG. Parasite Eve is a rather short game, averaging maybe 12 hours. Due to this, the developers included a New Game Plus mode that could actually be replayed over and over again, with each additional playthrough increasing the difficulty and making items harder and harder to find. Within this New Game Plus mode, the developers included an optional dungeon, which is the Chrysler Building from Manhattan. It has around 70 floors, and each 10 floors you go up, you have to fight a boss, which you've already fought before from earlier within the game. Once you reach the top, you actually get to take on the game's true final boss and unlock an optional ending. This was all added to the game to give it additional replay value due to it being so short. However, for me personally, I didn't feel compelled to perform an additional playthrough as the game is essentially too short, and I felt that it was unlikely that I had missed much content in the first place. One of the few issues I had while playing Parasite Eve was the speed at which the character moves within the environment. While that may sound like a silly thing to complain about, it tended to get frustrating at times due to some locations within the game appearing to have a very high encounter rate. Graphically, the game is beautiful for its time. It has pre-rendered backgrounds full of detail, all the way down to individual desks being filled with items. The game's cutscenes are also some of the best on the PlayStation 1. There's plenty of action-packed scenes full of F-16s and Harriers buzzing between the New York City's many skyscrapers, and at one point there's a whole entire naval strike force including an aircraft carrier. Artistically, you can see that this game came smack dab in the middle of Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII. It's almost like it was a test run for Final Fantasy VIII as far as how character sprites would look and how they would interact with environments. The story to Parasite Eve, although short, is full of action and keeps the player at the edge of their seat. Despite the cast only being about 3 characters, there's Aya, which we've already talked about, the rookie police officer from Manhattan, a quirky Japanese scientist that doesn't say much other than a bunch of mumbo-jumbo about mitochondria once in a while, and then Aya's partner Daniel, who is basically Barrett Wallace from Final Fantasy VII in a khaki business suit and a much smaller gun, but an equally as huge temper. There are, however, other characters in the game, but they don't get very much dialogue, and they're not really involved in too much of the story. So, should you play Parasite Eve in 2018? I think so, yes, especially if you're already a fan of JRPGs or Resident Evil. I bet you'll find this game to be a great experience. It's just a shame that the game is so short and has such little replay value, but nevertheless, I think you should find a copy on eBay, or dust off the copy you've had since the 90s and give it one more playthrough. I bet you'll be surprised on just how well it's held up over the years. I still remember my first experience with Parasite Eve. It was actually the first game I can remember playing on the PlayStation 1. My family took a trip to see an uncle of mine. His son wasn't home, and I got bored and I snuck downstairs and into his room as I heard my uncle mention he had a PlayStation. I put in Parasite Eve and I was quickly horrified by the opening cutscene. I didn't play much, or for very long. A few years later, my cousin passed away from a drug overdose. It was a shame I never got the chance to really meet him, as I'm from a rather large family. He seemed to have great taste in video games, so thanks Josh, for letting me play Parasite Eve, even if I did it without asking. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review/retrospective of Parasite Eve on the PlayStation 1. If you do not mind, drop a like, let me know that you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions, comments, or differing opinions than I had about the game, feel free to leave a comment. And if you want to catch future live streams and future reviews, make sure to hit this subscribe button right here.